My name is Andrew Hall. I'm currently a professor of cybersecurity at DAU, which is the Defense Acquisition University. It's a federal university within the Department of Defense. And I mainly focus within doing software assurance credentials and aspects within teaching the acquisition workforce cybersecurity. I'm going to be talking about putting the sec back into DevSecOps, and this will be pre-introductory on what drives security in DevSecOps and into your software development lifecycle. To go through, before we get to a Q&A session questions, I'll be going over what is DevSecOps, the future, preparing for the future, going into the security of embedded, getting security embedded into DevSecOps, going through security principles that are needed in software development lifecycle, and how to get security integrated into your Agile principles, your Agile teams. To get started, what is DevSecOps? Well, this is a term that comes from DevOps. And what is DevOps? It's development and operations, going through, often shown in an infinity model like this. But DevSecOps is not DevOps plus security or security plus DevOps. It needs to be more than that. It needs to be more incorporated, going through. As we go through development, that's part of a factory, a system. I'll talk through often, and operations is another system. Your development is like engineers making a car. It's the ones that doing the actual work of making your product into it, while your operations are your pipeline, your automation parts of your scanning and getting the code goes through like an automotive factory making the car for delivery to your customer. This is a comic I like that goes through. Dealing with shift left. Shift left is a term that's often used and heard into it, that we need to move shift security left within DevOps to make it DevSecOps and everything else. But what does that really mean, as this comic goes, is that they couldn't afford a DevOps team. There's a lot of accuracy in that, because DevOps should have already included security and a lot of other aspects into it if they do it right. There shouldn't need to be a term of DevSecOps even to begin with. So we go through the process of everything. It's kind of a misnomer with it. I have another slide that deals with shift left as well after this one. To go through that, it's so commonly used it's almost become pointless in use into it, as security needs to be embedded in and properly incorporated like you do with any other DevOps processes, going into Agile and your software development lifecycle. Other aspects of another fun meme that people use, that DevSecOps is not DevOps with security shift to the left, and there's lots of aspects to it. DevOps started kind of in terms early 2000s, but really came out in the 70s. While DevSecOps is more recent with the DevSecOps manifesto and everything else to go through. And a lot of it deals with silos and everything else. It's just keywords that people use and go through, and it's not great to keep using terms over and over without any emphasis to actually make it better and improve upon your processes. So it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 15 years or anything else. Just don't use terms to kind of allude to make things better instead of actually doing process to make it better. A lot of that deals with silos. Probably no one here has ever been in a company that has silos. That's probably unheard of, right? In these days, I wish that would be a true statement. Almost any company you get into will have their silos, their legacy groups, or anything else, and silos can be in many different forms. As groups get busy and overtasked, they also become their own silo into it. This comic is great in that they knew this organization was full of silos, but they just didn't know how heavily defended they were. A lot of organizations have heavily defended silos. Either inadvertently or advertently, they do it. And it's a bad practice. We need to get rid of it. So what should DevSecOps be, or any other type of DevOps in reality? It needs to be cross-functional teams. You need to have teams that help each other, have the right expertise in your development teams and your operations teams that can handle the issues, handle the problems that they arise without having to rely and go to different groups and hit roadblocks into it. Get into some other aspects of lean and other process-oriented philosophies that really apply into software as well. Just that they use different terms and you just have to reevaluate them and translate them into the right terminology to make them relevant within your groups. That's kind of a big part. And you have to integrate security and cybersecurity into the groups. I'll be talking later about software assurance and that role, which is a big term. Other people use different terminologies for that same type of role. You need to be transparent. We need to not keep things hidden and behind walls of they just can't have access to or don't understand why they have to do these changes or anything else. We need to be better at that. Get continuous updating, making sure we're staying relevant in our scans and our knowledge and our technology. Be adaptable. We shouldn't become stagnant and stuck in a process, in a way. And probably the worst is when you start going down and then groups get overtasked and they put their heads down and they end up becoming siloed themselves because they stop taking input and providing input to others. And that's an inadvertent silo that happens. You might not think is a silo, but it is, because it then produces roadblocks and stoppage within your DevSecOps or your DevOps flows. That infinity model should be consistent, be able to keep flowing. You need to not have any breaks or transitions within it, which is why I like this diagram of the infinity model. It's done by SEI. They got it out there. And that security really isn't another system being added into your DevOps environments. It's really being encapsulated, integrated within everything that you do. As you go into it, these are just some examples of different parts that can go in different aspects of your DevOps environments. But in reality, this will all go into how you do your user stories, how you deal with your requirements, how you build up your development teams, and build up on what you really need to produce secure software in secure environments. Which gets into another great comic that relates both to IT, security, and engineering, and many other aspects. Government and industry, you often might hear some of these terms, laugh about them, go in with them. That it's a small change. Let's do it in production. It doesn't matter. Or they don't have to learn new things, or backups, repository duplicates. They aren't needed to go through. We don't need to do scripts. We don't need to automate aspects to make things better. I know it. I can do it. I have the job security because I'm the expert in it. It's not great. There's great resources to help you get good frameworks. NIST has the Secure Software Development Framework. Then there's Building Security Maturation Model that's out there. CIS, mainly Control 16. The CIS group does a great job of taking requirements from other groups and kind of making them a little bit readable for organizations, especially industry, to get into understanding the security aspects of controls. And the SAINTCON Discord, we have a CIS channel that they go through each control, which would be nice to see some more communication with and questions asked amongst people to kind of share information, kind of break down that silo even within us, between industries and between our expertise, and start sharing information with it. Then there's OWASP SAM that deals with Agile, and then there's a government SWAP study that came out. And the SWAP study is the Software Acquisition and Practices study that the Defense Innovation Board did. They went through and give some aspects of improving software, or the software development and acquisition strategies. These are all available and usually freely able to get into them. Great resources to go into. The Linux Foundation also has some training out there for developing secure software. Many great courses, lots of time that you can do for internal on-the-job training and other aspects. Or if you're building your own framework, your own DevOps teams, environments, or trying to improve yours, I recommend going out and looking at a few different frameworks out there, standards, recommendations, to see how it can help you become better at making secure software. That gets into a key term that I really like, which is software assurance. Often misunderstood on what it is. A lot of people might think that's software quality assurance, but really it deals with security. And this is a definition from the Committee on National Security Systems, CNSS, and instruction number 4009 from the National Information Assurance Glossary. That is the level of confidence that software is free from vulnerabilities, either intentionally designed into the software or accidentally inserted at any time during the life cycle, and that the software functions as intended in the intended manner. That's a big thing. How many of you test for the full confidence that your software works as designed, both from accidental insertion as well as intentional surface? It's tough to go into all the aspects that go into fully testing software to make sure it runs how it should. Your software should be able to run in any environment. A compromised or perfect environment should not matter for your software to be run in. And that kind of gets into zero trust and some of these other keywords that are coming out, and that it's really about making tools that run in a compromised or degraded environment, but knowing for sure that it will function as intended. So no matter what environment you throw your software in, you should be able to be confident that it is mature and able to be secure. As we go into other aspects, the government has lots of different groups that have a little bit different definitions within software assurance. So the Department of Homeland Security just deals with trustworthiness, predictable execution, and conformance. And then the DoD, as a unique aspect, they have sound system engineering practices. That's a unique thing to think about, is that if you have sound system engineering, that means you have good practices on making things better, good feedback, good requirements flows, and aspects within your software development lifecycle to improve and build upon. NASA really blows out the definition to branching out into getting the safety assurance and security assurance and quality assurance and many of those aspects. As you deal with quality assurance, that's probably what most of you deal with people making sure that your code works to the basics for the requirements and everything like that. But when you get into some highly sensitive projects that deal with life and death, safety becomes an issue in other aspects, and security should just be right in there with it. Be fully transparent and integrated into it, and not be something new and unique for many of these software developers or factories or DevSecOps groups to deal with. And NIST goes in with the SAINTCON project, which may or may not still be around, to help achieve trustworthiness and predictable execution. We should have predictable execution in our code, be able to rely and trust on our DevOps and DevSecOps environments. To go further into how to get Sec embedded into DevSecOps, the non-government entities that I've been able to find with it is the Object Management Group, OMG. They do justifiable trustworthiness and meaning established business and security objectives. It's kind of interesting they had business objectives into it. So the bottom line for businesses is profit and making sure that they're able to do products that they can sell and everything else. Kind of interesting within that. And then you got Safe Code, which is the software assurance forum for excellence. This kind of aligns a lot with the government definitions that are out there. And the big thing is that you have to think about the whole system. My slides just jumped. So key points is that everyone is responsible for security. It needs to be embedded into every DevSecOps team, ideally. Every single one of your teams should have what I call a software assurance liaison, someone with some emphasis or understanding of security requirements, security controls, how secure coding's done, often not taught in schools, and many other aspects. And the job of them is to be put into your Agile teams to help translate requirements and help the other programmers, developers get educated on making good user stories, good aspects. As I did a webinar last month on Agile and security, some of it is doing basic user story of, I want a business wanting an online app for their customers to order from. So the basic user story is I want an online app for my customers to do, but they miss out on the security aspect of that. And it really should be, I want an online app that doesn't allow for misuse of the information my customer does to buy the product and protects their information. It's basically the same user story, but the emphasis is more on how you develop it in a more secure way, and the internal tests that deal with it before they can release it is a little bit more stringent, because they have to start thinking about ways that their code might run inadvertently in a bad manner, where hackers or people with malicious intent can easily steal stuff from. And if you get that earlier in your process, it's much easier to maintain a secure code base that functions as intended, does what it's always supposed to do, no matter where it ends up. It might go into a little bit different environment, but you know that you have hit these broad areas and more confident on it won't be done in malicious ways. We need to customize our tool sets. It's essential. We can't just rely on the basic DevSecOps philosophy at times where they bring in these scanning tools and just do default configurations on their scans for it. So your static code analysis tools just have the default settings on. You need to understand your environments that they go into and start tailoring them and customizing some of those scanning capabilities into your environments, especially on the ops side. And then leadership needs to get trust in the process. Team forming and product owners. Product owners need to be educated to make better epics and better philosophy to guide their Agile teams. The teams need to be formed with the right expertise, let it do self-forming, get the right people in there. If they're lacking their SWA liaison, start getting someone trained within that team, get some mentorship. A lot of bigger organizations should be able to get a security expert a little bit more involved that has more security focus down into the Agile teams. Well, startups and smaller organizations that have more issue might have to do some more mentoring, and where they need some training and cross-training and teaching down into it, do some on-the-job training to get the people into the right level and slowly build up their confidence and go with it. It's a big growth process. It's a big dynamic. Not very many companies do this correctly or at all, and it's a thing that needs to be improved upon. So whether security principles are needed, there's a lot. When you take that infinity model and kind of lay it out, you kind of see the basic waterfall process into it, but there's a lot to it. Cybersecurity needs to be automated as much as possible. And when you think about the ops side of the aspect, that's your factory. And you think about lean processes and about operations, cybersecurity and test and everything else is considered waste. We don't produce products. We're overhead. Business doesn't like us because we just take up money. The point of that is that we need to be more embedded into the process, and that's how you remove waste. We remove those roadblocks by getting into the process, into the flow, where we aren't these little silos that are put in between plan and development and everything else. Instead, we're in it automatically. We're just flowing through it, so it becomes a continuous flow. Like in a normal factory, if there's a roadblock of a machine that's taking too long or anything else, they figure out ways of mitigating that load onto that bottleneck. Either get another machine to help do it, which would be breaking off the project into different, more agile teams in software, or use different tool sets, different scanning tools, how you branch out for your pen testing and everything else to make sure that it's a smaller impact on your total development aspect. I'll get into so that in the future aspects of my slide of how to get into the CI/CD and get security, getting into that continuous integration, continuous build, where we aren't a hindrance on it, but it becomes fluid, where we have code that we trust and go through. The big points are give vulnerability scanning, code coverage, coding standards. It's all your ops side automated. You're trying to, the security experts on your pipeline side need to learn about the tools, get them so they function properly, learn how they can be more effective of the resources in the environment to go through, and keep updating standards and best practices as they go with it. Not stay stringent on old practices or old philosophies. You need to be fluid, adaptable within it all. And then on the Agile side, you have to think of new ways of building your team. Agile has many options, many capabilities when done right. When there's a lot of flexibility of how you approach it. And a lot of companies don't understand that and kind of just choose one way and stick to it, and it's a cookie cutter process through it all. Every team is dynamic. Every team can be different. And you have to adapt and do it well. Stringent processes often revert you back into waterfall and bad practices. You need to make sure that you continue to grow and build on all that you do. That's kind of a key thing within this comic that I enjoy, is that many Agile programs start out great, they go into it, but there's that waterfall again. In this case, after 5 years, they're going in circles. They aren't actually making things better. They're just looping back. Teams change, leadership change, the people that are pioneering your Agile process move on or whatnot, and it's not done right. Your company never really matured. Your DevOps teams never fully got the right way and go forward, so they go back to their old habits. You have your QA, Dev, Ops, cubicle farm silos that start being built up again. And that's your waterfall process that is really bad and detrimental to making fast-paced, secure software, or any software, in a secure manner, effectively and quickly. I have worked on some programs where they're getting into this, and they on the bottom level, really hardcore, the developers are all gung-ho for Agile and everything else, and then go up a few levels within management, and their definition of Agile and the process has changed. When in the government, we have earned value management that doesn't tie with Agile very well. So when they start to try to correlate something as a metrics in the wrong way because some HR or business wants something that way, it detriments the Agile flow and the growth that can happen from your Agile development teams through DevOps and DevSecOps, and they sadly go back to a more waterfall flow or add a waterfall aspect into your Agile processes. That is sad to see. And as many people per Agile, there's a lot of mini waterfalls. Every sprint cycle is theoretically a full waterfall cycle going through. You're doing all your checks and balances and producing a product that goes out. Product owners need to have connection to security requirements. They need to understand it. Security needs to have a good tie-in for requirements back to your product owners, to your Agile teams, to your Scrum Masters or anything else, through the right channels. You need to cross-train. A lot of growth comes from teaching others. You need to not just be in your little individual silo and not be a team player. You need to work with your teams, answer questions, help people when they're struggling. If their user stories or other aspects aren't being at the right level, start educating, training them, teaching them better ways to make their stories better, make their requirements more secure through transparency. Because the requirement doesn't have to be a straight security requirement. It can be a requirement with a security emphasis embedded within it. And that's a better way of going through it because that forces the developers to really think about what they do. Your whole process gets a lot more thought into how you execute it instead of having it done and it goes to the next person for review, or the other group then sees it and then goes, we did it wrong. You have to go back and fix it. A lot of cost goes into fixing mistakes, and we can prevent a lot of that if we do it properly. The security silo is very massive at times, and often in run groups. And I've seen the silos shifted left, where they move it from the back to the front and try to get the requirements in, but they never get it into the right level. They never get the groups actually into it. So you have these awesome requirements that go in, and then it gets through, but never looked at, and it comes back, and they have to repeat the process. So you end up with security all around in different silos, both at the front and the back, and some in the middle, which is really sad to go through, and different groups. And even within security, you have different groups that don't always talk well amongst each other, which is a whole other aspect, especially if you deal with compliance and IT security. Those groups are sometimes differential. They should be reorganized more often than comfortable at times. Your team should not be stagnant. In order to cross-train and do stuff well, you should let teams move, try new things, help each other, train different groups. An effective team has good people and has good skill sets that need to be moved off to others. Not all teams that are highly effective last long-term. They're great short-term for projects, and when they're broken off, those members often can share good things, but they don't always end up as effective teams. But there's a good chance that most of them will be effective teams and help build even more effective teams. Your Agile, your developers will continue to grow and develop and mature in great ways. And I've seen ways where we've removed silos and gotten teams for small projects where we've gotten the right expertise, both in development of software and engineering, working together, where we take complex, highly regulated projects within some of my DoD work that I've done, where it has hard rules and safety and security, and we got the requirements in early and worked with the dev teams and got cycles back into us for review, so we were able to take programs that normally take 3 years or more down to 18 months for an end-to-end project, including hardware, to be put into secure environments. It is possible when you get the right leadership and the right buy-in from groups. You can do pretty amazing achievements. Another one is getting that software liaison within the Agile development team. Security gets built into the process, removes the silos, allows teams to adapt and grow. All big aspects that I really want to push forward and see is my term of SWA liaison, getting that security-focused individual in the teams, working with the Scrum Masters, working within the developers, getting that security silo fully broken down, removed, and embedded into the whole development lifecycle. Then we get into preparing for the future. And some of the aspects is CI/CD, shrinking the attack surface, threat modeling, kind of deals with model engineering as well, tabletop for the future. DARPA has a unique program for certification of software that's fully automated that they're working on, which is pretty interesting to think about. Artificial intelligence, and there's a lot of unknowns that go into it that we can get into. Aspects within the DARPA stuff. DARPA's worked a lot with artificial intelligence. If you look back at the Cyber Grand Challenge from, I believe, 2016, when they went to DEF CON and did their autonomous CTF within the servers, that's a big aspect. Self-writing code and other aspects go into that. So CI/CD, those deployment rooms often aren't built well, especially from legacy groups moving forward. This comic is lots of fun. Don't you need a more reliable deployment system like CI/CD? It's just a fad. Our current system works fine. We have mice running and everything else. Why change what's not broken? Why improve? That's being stagnant. There's security issues that come with it. There's probably lots of vulnerabilities with the elephant or whatnot. What if something dies or stops working in that? How do you go in and fix it? How do you go through it? You need to think about continuing making things better, figuring out where processes are lacking, figuring out where security issues or bottlenecks or silos are starting to be formed, where only one thing can do the job. That's bad. You need to figure out how to make it adaptable, changeable, be able to adjust to the needs of your business. And sadly, a lot of businesses are very cautionary within their approach. They're very risk adverse, so they don't like change. So we have to present appropriate arguments to get them comfortable with continuing to change and get out of that philosophy and actually show that there's risk in staying behind that's bigger than doing the change. That's often hard to do. This is another great infographic on CI/CD. Some aspects that you have to think about. If you automate too much and not do the right checks within it, then the attacker can maybe just automate the attack right into your system without any effort into it. You have to work at your tools, evaluate them, get into the third-party analysis of any of the tools that you use. Used another infographic kind of like this on other aspects where open source software, it's great and everything else, but then you don't add to the open source system or add to the development cycles. You end up going back to hosted versions or walled gardens where you need support because you lose the expertise, lose aspects to it. You need to understand what you're getting into, understand the full aspects, both in security and development and other aspects to go with it. When we get into artificial intelligence, that's a unique other part. When we have, this is the DARPA Grand Challenge from DEF CON, and this was a unique thing with computers writing their own code, writing their own vulnerabilities, writing their own fixes. When that becomes a thing, that's basically your development going into your operations pipeline. That operations side, that whole pipeline starting to make its own adjustments of code. How do you deal with that? How do you make sure your development team can adapt to any changes that might happen automatically in an operations side? That's a big unknown. I'm not sure if anyone's fully gotten into a part where developers produce code, but your operations side can modify that code for security or other aspects. And then how do the developers get the feedback of the changes so they can stay up informed of that and move forward? Unique aspects to think about within this. A lot can be scary, a lot can be good, but we need to be forward thinking. When this comes up and gets into it, we need to be educated. That's a continuous learning back in the IT graveyard. I don't want to learn something new. I don't want to be up to date in the things. That's detrimental to the whole process. We need to be adaptive and learn to go into it. Now, a lot of the unknowns get into quantum computing, alien technology, whatever you can dream of. There's a lot out there that we don't even know what's feasible. Some black government program that's doing something weird, or some unique business somewhere in the world doing something that's unheard of, unknown, totally out of this world. And how do we deal with it? We can only prepare for the unknown if we continue to guard against the present. And that we have to be up to date and continually learning and improving our own processes, our own DevSecOps environments, learning what's waste, what's bottlenecks, continue to maintain it, kind of like the old factories that are still around, even in the automotive world. They keep continually making it better. It went from people assembling cars to robots assembling cars. The same aspect deals with DevSecOps and our development aspects, is that we need to figure out what's slowing things down, and how we can improve it. What parts of security are taking too long or doing the wrong thing? How do we branch it out? When you look at the factory side, it still has the side shoot-offs for pen testing or doing SBOMs or looking at your third-party code aspects that take extra time. But those are like taking a car part that's assembled and running it through a test track and doing other aspects. What you learn from that goes in to help improve your existing pipeline. Figure out where your tools are lacking. Figure out where your security needs to be improved upon. What can be done in your factory, or what needs to go back to your development teams, and get their user stories more up to date, up to how your programmers, what skills are they lacking? What new secure coding standards need to be put in there? What needs to be trained? What functions need to be removed from their tool sets because they're full of holes, lots of vulnerabilities. They shouldn't be allowed in the first place. Why did they even get in there? There's lots of aspects as we take a lot, and a lot of people are using things that they don't develop these days and adding it to code. We need to understand the history, and that's kind of the philosophy of the software building materials that are coming around, is fully getting a history of what's out there and where it comes from, and how to make sure that it's viable in our DevSecOps, in our environments when we produce software so we're secure. We need to remove security as a giant waste and silo roadblock that people hate because we're just a hindrance on their things, but get it into so it's transparent and into the process, into how they develop code, into how they do things, so that it makes everything this work and be happy, which is probably still a pipe dream for many years, but it'll be nice to see when we finally start improving and maturing our whole environments, where we can see growth and we stop going in circles and cycles. Just like how Agile comic before, where the people every 5 years hit the waterfall. Security, in a lot of sense, we hit the same issues every few years that we thought we got rid of, but they come back in different forms. We should move away from that so it stops being circles, but more of a line where we're improving and becoming better. So I have about 14 minutes left. So have a Q&A. Any questions? No one has any questions within DevSecOps? This is a whole different dynamic of how a lot of companies do things, and we need to really change the way that we think and how we produce software. Yes? That's a good point. That's train budgets to get different members to different conferences, to get them to bring it back and then teach other groups, as funding won't let the whole team go to different aspects, kind of divide and conquer. And some aspects can help within that to go in. A lot of organizations do that in some extent, even larger ones where they can't send everyone, so they send certain people that have more inclination in that, so they can learn the most and bring it back and help do internal training processes. And if even within that, you take people and you can give them subjects to research on their own to learn, and they'll go out and learn and build up and become their own experts in it, and then they can come back and share that information within the teams, within the environments. Give them little side projects, if possible, on doing something different. It's kind of like the philosophy of letting programmers help on open source projects and use part of their time to build on that because they can learn stuff within that project that then they can translate into their normal workload and maybe learn something from different teams that they worked with to build up that team on new experiences. And that's kind of the point of letting your teams reorganize into different teams, depending if you have more than just one DevSecOps team, because every DevSecOps teams will have different lessons learned and different expertise that they can then teach each other in different aspects by either through team reorganizations or other types of training aspects. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else? Friday morning, everyone's brains all melted. Yes? The software build materials to build it and how you build it? Is that what you're asking? Or I can't quite fully. Okay. So there are at least two tools that I know of that will do some type of software bill of materials. They're pretty expensive tools. They go through and do full library analysis of code to go through. I'm not sure if I should say vendors. We can talk later on that on here. But they go through and will diverge it and actually figure out where different libraries come from, which countries and aspects. So you can do it. It's a really hard process in a lot of things, and companies are slowly getting into it more. And it takes big databases. Some of the tools are like multi-terabytes of information that they have to go through it. So it is kind of a bottleneck on that third-party analysis of code to go through. But it is becoming a bigger reality and being pushed a lot more. The government's really pushing it into their software development, making it requirements, which will then push a lot of companies to get into it, as it's going to be a hard requirement for programs. And there's a lot of software-centric programs going on and being done right now. So it is a reality. It's not an easy reality right now, but it is something that hopefully within the next few years will become more feasible to more organizations to get into. But there is some tools out there that will do analysis. Yes? Yeah. It's definitely a growth field and part of the continuous improvement aspect, and it's nice to see these tools get moving and being built. It's a good process for the software. Anyone else? Yes? That's a very good question, and that's sadly kind of unique to every organization in some regards because of how you build your processes, how your business runs, how they've set up. That's kind of like the original comic of the I know this place had silos, but I didn't realize how heavily protected they are. Is that you have to figure out ways of removing that protection, that comfort of that silo that people have. This is my job security. This is my silo. I don't want to share my information. This is my checkbox of the process. But that's working within the other groups. If you're this silo, try to talk to the silos next to you to figure out better ways of improving your process flow. Yes?
I think so. In an organization I've worked for in the past, some of the ways that we started to break down the silos, we have like weekly lunch and learn trainings where we present to each other about different topics that we were interested in. So like the security people would talk to the devs, and the devs would talk to the security people. I feel like that way we're kind of all, we're not maybe having the same conversations every day, but because we're having different conversations.
No, that is one way, is to do lunch and learn type things where you get that different expertise and kind of get it through, but make it more not really optional lunch and learn, but more required. Little meetings, share of knowledge, kind of get them so they understand what you do, because a lot of reason why silos exist is because one group doesn't understand what the other group is even doing. So as you understand what other groups do, you can optimize your process and flow, and that helps remove your silos, and that, oh, we didn't realize we're duplicating all these efforts or doing these things or doing all this other stuff because they're stuck in their silo and they don't want to share and do things. So it's really getting the other viewpoints, bringing other groups into it. Some books that kind of talk about it. The original book for operations is called The Goal, which is really nice. It deals with a factory manager and going through and learning how to make things streamlined. And he has a great thing with Boy Scouts and how if you put the fast Boy Scouts, fast hikers early, then they separate in weird long line and everything's all hodgepodge. Well, if you put the slowest person in the front, then he actually moves faster and everyone gets there at the same time and it's more effective at it. It's a really unique philosophy, and then that was the emphasis for the books, the Phoenix Project and the Unicorn Project, which are also really great books to read, but do take them with a grain of salt. They don't have a lot of security in them, but if you can take some of those terminologies that maybe some of the managers have read and add security into that terminology, it can help change their viewpoint and get them thinking better and more effective in making things for your organization. Yes? Yeah, that sounds about right. It's an old book. Any other questions? Yes? Yeah. I probably wouldn't do AI as a first step into a lot of aspects. I would get a tool that you understand and then base your AI off of that and then build upon that to make it better. Kind of the same philosophy of if you understand the thing that you're working with, when the issue pops up, you can find it quickly. Well, if you're dealing with something that you have no clue how it runs and an issue pops up, you won't find it for months or years later. And that's an issue with security. If you try to use tools that you aren't familiar with, they can have unforeseen consequences within it. So if you're trying to deal with AI, I recommend that you deal with a process that you're familiar with to base it off of, so then you can become trusted. You can build trust within the process and build upon that, which is probably easier said than done. But anything else? If not, thank you.